Okay, everyone, we are live, and it is going to be kind of a little bit scattered today. There's a couple of, ongoing things about church history that I would like to talk about, in addition to kind of continuing to provide updates on current events and current happenings in the Catholic Church. I will ask people to um, please disregard the pile of books behind me. I am in the process of rearranging my living room to accommodate the needs of my household more efficiently. And guess what? That means moving books. That means moving a lot of books and reshelving them. It's a whole thing. So let's get going. Okay, what do I want to talk about first? Again, my merch, because one of the things that is, oh, I have someone actually watching this live stream. Awesome. Hello, person. Um, so, um, again, I have my St. Joseph shirt on. This is a comically large St. Joseph shirt on me because this is a men's 3X. It was sold at my Catholic supply store, probably intending to be a Father's Day gift to someone. And indeed, it will be going to a friend of mine once I am done performatively using it today. But again, I want to illustrate the fact St. Joseph has merch. And another and the fact that saints have merch kind of affects the way that Catholics think about both church history and also sort of their own identity. And because when you're thinking about saints, you're taught that you're thinking about real people who really lived and who really did good things. And in the case of Joseph, excuse me, I'm going to turn the slide off. And in the case of Joseph specifically, in a lot of ways, Joseph is the first real saint. And I'm gonna have to turn the light on. Sorry. It's a weird time of year, and I have um, uncertain lighting in my home, so forgive me. Anyway, so Joseph, in a lot of ways, is the first real saint, and what I mean by that is you've got Jesus, who in Catholic belief is God. You've got Mary, who in Catholic belief is God's mom, which at the end of the episode, we will actually go and look at the canons of the Council of Ephesus and see what that has to say about Mary. But so you have this family, right? You've got Mary, who is human, but almost angelic. But then you have Joseph, who is literally just some guy, but he's some guy who chose to have faith. He's some guy who chose to do the right thing. He's some guy who, in a very real sense, um, Catholic Catholics are taught from the time that they're little kids that like Joseph is the kind of person that if God was going to pick their dad, that is the kind of dad that God would pick for himself. So that means that Catholic men are presented with what's intended to be an achievable standard of holiness and behavior within their family. Crucially, it's also a model of masculinity in which the patriarch, the father, is not understood to be the focus of the family. The focus of the family is on the mother and the child or children, which, do Catholic men always live up to that ideal? No, absolutely they do not. But, has there been attempts to construct patriarchy in Catholic countries where the father rules with an iron fist? Yes, that has happened. However, the status of Joseph and Joseph's relationship to his wife and his son his adopted son, his stepson, is understood to be a model for masculinity in a way that both challenges patriarchy and makes like conventional feminist critiques kind of beside the point, because at that point you're not arguing about how should men act in a fall, because okay, you are still arguing about how should men act in a fallen world. The difference is that you have an example of someone who had no power, no authority, and who wasn't really getting anything out of it, except that he knew he was doing the right thing for his wife and his child. And that that allows Catholic women and Catholic feminists in particular to create a very powerful critique of the patriarchy and a critique of, this sort of very, what we might call like white evangelical alpha males, right? Like the hard charging, I am big and I am bold and I'm going to go out and I'm going to conquer, 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 because that's what men do. They explore, they conquer, they're warriors, they're fighters, they're conquerors, right? This is saying, no, God didn't want a dad who was a warrior. He didn't want a dad who was a conqueror. I mean, yeah, his stepdad was part of the house of David, but his stepdad was also, just he was a carpenter, he was a tecton, he was a laborer. He was just some guy. So for a lot of men, especially if they don't come from wealth, if they come from a working class background, it lets them see themselves in the story as a man and as a father, but a model of fatherhood that is focused on care and nurturing. So I just want to show you a few examples of prayer cards. Um, the Catholic Church has a deep and abiding love of 19th century chromolithography, mostly because prayer cards became really, really popular in the 19th century and continue to be popular in the 20th and 21st century. And well, once you've got, a really cute piece of clip art, you can just keep you can keep reusing that forever. This one is on the back. I will read it to you. It is a prayer to Saint Joseph for employment. But let me read what it says, okay? Dear Saint Joseph, you were yourself once faced with the responsibility of providing the necessities of life for Jesus and Mary. Look down with fatherly compassion upon me and my anxiety in my present inability to support my family. Please help me to find gainful employment very soon so that this heavy burden of concern will be lifted from my heart and that I will be able to provide for those whom God has entrusted to my care. Help me guard against bitterness and discouragement so that we may emerge from this trial spiritually enriched and with even greater blessings from God. Amen. Okay. Again, it's a nice prayer. It also shows something that is important about Catholicism and prayer cards, is because prayer cards give you the words. If you aren't sure how to pray or what to pray, or even necessarily who to ask for help, who to ask for assistance, someone will give you a prayer card, or you'll find a prayer card and you'll go, "Oh, I need help looking for a job. Cool. I can ask St. Joseph to help me." And again, this isn't understood to be a, Joseph will drop the perfect job in your lap and you don't have to do anything. This is basically, Joseph will pray for you. Joseph will ask God to do you a solid. Joseph will, if you will, Joseph is going to kind of blow on the dice a little bit. Joseph will make sure that you're in the right place at the right time, but you have to be there and you have to do the work. It's a partnership. It's a contract. Dare I even say it? It's a covenant. So Just another quick example, and I want to show you, how, here we have another Joseph with baby Jesus. You can see this one, they decided to go with the Orthodox, extremely old Joseph and a very cute little baby. This one is actually supposed to be a novena, where you're asking for the protection of Saint Joseph, his intercession for you to bring him close to Jesus. And then it includes the historical note, which is this prayer was found in the 50th year of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in 1505. It was sent from the Pope to Emperor Charles when he was to pray before he was going into battle. Whoever shall read this prayer or hear it or keep it about themselves shall never die a sudden death or be drowned, nor shall poison take effect on them, neither shall they fall into the hands of the enemy, nor or shall be burned in fire, or shall be overpowered in battle. Amen. And it says, say for 9 mornings for anything you may desire. It has never been known to fail, so be sure you really want what you ask for. Presumably, if you ask for something really bad, this might be the one time that it has failed, because Joseph would say no. And again, I wanted to highlight that historical note because all of the promises that are listed on that are not things that the Vatican currently attaches to prayers. Like the whole, you will not be poisoned if you pray this prayer, or if you hang on to this prayer card, or if you have the prayer written down or you memorize it. That is a very medieval, that is a very Renaissance, like old school kind of piety. That even today, a lot of Catholics would read that and they would go, poison? Really? But at the same time, you might think, hey, can't hurt. It's not going to make me more likely to get poisoned now, is it? No. So you might, go, hey, roll the dice. Besides, everyone wants wizard powers. So maybe you can get wizard powers. I don't know. It's worth the shot. I do kind of like the fact that, for any real rock-ribbed atheists out here, we do in fact have a testable claim right now. So, keep this in your wallet. And I guess if you die of natural causes, it worked. I don't know if that's quite how it works, but, it's worth a shot. And then we have this one, which is another prayer to Saint Joseph. This one, you have Jesus in an adorable pink little tunic. Joseph is wearing an extremely anachronistic carpenter's apron, but that's okay. And this one is a prayer to Saint Joseph for chastity. So this is Saint Joseph, father and guardian of virgins, and to whose faithful keeping were entrusted innocency itself, Jesus Christ and Mary, virgins of virgins. I beseech thee through Jesus and Mary, those pledges so dear to thee, to keep me from all uncleanness, and to grant that my mind may be untainted, my heart pure, and my body chaste. Help me to always serve Jesus and Mary in perfect chastity. Amen. And if you pray this every day, you get 3 years worth of time in purgatory for committing a very specific sin that you have repented for. But you don't have to, but you've done the penance, right? You're paid off, you're squared up, you're good. You have earned an indulgence. So if you do commit a sin, then you won't have to pay off you won't have to be purified of the sin in purgatory, essentially. And again, the 3 years plenary indulgence, that's an 18th or 19th century thing, but it's still alive and well in modern Catholic piety, which is kind of cool and kind of interesting. And again, kind of takes me back to this larger point that I've been trying to emphasize is that in a lot of ways, Catholicism thinks of itself as being this sort of conversation across time and between very disparate groups of people. But in which everyone is situated in their own time and their own place. So people, once they're in heaven, are kind of both within and without time at the same time, and that includes Joseph, which is why, like, people remember his name and are like, oh, yeah, cool, let's name the baby Joseph. He was a good guy, even though he has no speaking lines in the Bible. But, that's good too. Anyway, that's all I had to say about Joseph. After this, we will be hitting other saints of significance and kind of talking about them and what they do. But I think we've, gotten a good grip on Joseph kind of as a model of masculinity. And that is something, because I got a lot of books about Joseph. I'm going to read through them and be reporting back periodically so that we can find out more about Joseph. What do people think about Joseph? How does Joseph's character get constructed? And then I'm going to start looking at more modern saints and just, look at how they're kind of humans become famous and humans become legends and humans become saints. Right. So you kind of have this really interesting interplay between biography and history and reality. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit of time off from theory and go into practice. Oh dear, I did not in fact bring up my YouTube channel. Well, not my YouTube, but my personal YouTube, which is where I hide my lists. Okay. Okay, I'm just bringing up my playlist and okay, and I am going to go into screen sharing now. And I'm going to start, as people may have noticed, we've been talking a lot about the papacy and the conclave because last year this channel didn't exist, so we didn't have any conclave coverage. And now we're kind of giving the 1 year retrospective of what is going on. And one of the things that I have noticed, and I'm sure a lot of other people have noticed, is that people like this Pope. And as a Catholic, it feels kind of good that the head of my religion is getting general good press. If for no other reason, then it means that when people find out that I'm Catholic, they're more likely to go, "Oh, are you one of the cool ones?" And I can be like, yes, I am. I like the Pope. As opposed to other people who are like, yeah, I'm not so hot on that Pope Leo guy, which kind of makes a lot of, people who aren't Catholic go, really? Like, the good part about being Catholic is having a really based Pope. And there was a recent episode on Dr. Kip Davis's channel where they were mostly doing the Lord's work and roasting one Wes Huff. But
Not either way.
the topic of the papacy came up. So I am going to play a little bit about people talking about the Pope from top to bottom. We have Vishanti, um, extremely smart person and rabbinical student, um, not a Catholic. We have Kip Davis, prominent scholar of the Dead Sea Scrolls, also not a Catholic. And we have Maddie, who is a meteorologist who studies like things with weather that I don't quite understand because I don't know how to weather that good. But these are very smart people. They spend a lot of time talking about the Bible and religion and that kind of stuff, and they're very cool. And this is what they have to say about the Pope, because I just thought that this was great. And is also like a really good example of how like chronically online people are thinking about the Pope right now. And let's face it, when you're talking about chronically online people, what you really mean is like adults under the age of 50.
A shirt. Yeah. Put it on a shirt.
Okay. There we go.
That's how we all the people that don't watch you are gonna buy it unironically. Yeah. That's how we get
explain it.
What's the word for when there was like the weird two pope situation in France?
Also, you didn't get to see me typing frantically and yelling at my computer screen. So this is me like providing the helpful information that I was attempting to provide while the stream was going on. What Dr. Maddie is, of course, correctly referring to is the Avignon captivity, which was when the King of France kidnapped the Pope and then caused the French cardinals to pick an entirely different Pope. So then we had two popes, one of whom was the properly elected Bishop of Rome and one who was some dude in Avignon.
Oh, the anti-pope.
Do you want an anti-pope? This is how we get an anti-pope. See, I need. Okay,
but how much energy is released when they like collide?
Ooh, that is a matter-antimatter interaction, and so it's a lot. That's like.
I would like to point out that there are actually several anti-popes right now. Most of them are from extraordinarily small sedevacantist groups, and really aren't like particularly significant. However, there is one of them who is named Peter III and is the head of the Palmarian Catholic Church, which is basically a cult that has a cathedral that they built in Spain. But he is an anti-pope. He has like the big papal tiara and everything. So presumably if someone could go to Spain, obtain anti-Pope Peter, take him to Rome, and have him touch Pope Leo, we would see if there would be a giant matter antimatter explosion. It's also possible that we would get to find out what happens when you put an anti-pope in close proximity to the bones of St. Peter, which could also be an interesting scientific experiment.
Like warp core
Probably a lot.
If we ever
Yes,
get
many
another
people are saying the
anti-pope,
Avignon papacy.
If we get another anti-pope, do you think?
if we ever get another anti-pope, they better
somebody
better develop that experiment.
Okay, I just have to push back against Vishanti's statement that J.D. Vance killed the Pope. Because let us be very, very clear here, okay? J.D. Vance met with Pope Francis on Holy Saturday. Pope Francis died on Easter Monday, and he had been very, very sick for about 6 months before that. So the better way of thinking about it, I think, is that Francis was literally clinging on to life with his fingernails because he wanted to have one last Holy Week as Pope, because he knew that the scheduling problems that would occur between Holy Week and the mourning period for the Pope would have been really terrible. It would have been difficult. And also, frankly, I mean, he got to be Pope for one last Easter, and that's pretty darn cool if you think about it. So that's my personal take on J.D. Vance and how he did not kill the Pope because that gives him too much credit. Instead, Francis went out on his own terms like a boss.
Right?
This
So,
Pope is the Chicago Pope, though, so he's not afraid to pick up a baseball bat. And I like that. Chicago Pope, Blues Brothers Pope, like that old picture
Yes.
of him. Blues Brothers, I'm here for Blues Brothers Pope, man.
Hey, it's a wild reality where I'm like, yeah, the Pope is cool.
right,
No
I mean,
Jews
what
in
what
any
is
other
this
country have
timeline that
ever
we're
said
living
that.
in?
Did you know that the current
Yeah, I love the fact that like we just had three people kind of fangirling over the Pope. Yes, I'm using the term fangirling in a gender neutral sense here. So you had like three people just geeking out about how cool the Pope is and how Chicago style Pope is the best Pope, which, yeah, Chicago style is pretty cool. And also, you know, as someone who has sincerely a lot of regret and wishing that things had turned out differently about some of the things that have happened to um, Jewish people, either at the direction or instigation of um, the Catholic Church, you know, frankly, it kind of feels good just to hear somebody saying laughingly, wow, this Pope is really cool, said like no other Jew in any other century, because it's true. Like prior to this, you know, I mean, did Alexander the Sixth like personally give shelter to a whole bunch of Jews who had been kicked out of Spain? Yes. Did he stop that from happening? No. Did he punish Ferdinand and Isabella in any real way? Also, no. Could he have? That would have been really tricky. But now the Pope is standing up for people who need people to stand up for him, and that's pretty cool.
Pope has of American public figures, he has the highest positive rating of any other American public figure.
Not Christ.
All
No
Americans are like, we like Blues
Oh,
Brothers
yeah.
Pope.
Christ.
Yeah.
Listen, let us have this. Okay. First of all, none of the popes ever have been from the United States, so that's a big one for us. It's our first pope. Okay. And he's from Chicago.
Yeah.
I
He's
kind of feel
Chicago
like you
Blues
guys,
Brothers Pope.
I kind of feel like you guys needed this one at
Yeah.
this time.
We did. We needed a W after all this.
I mean, look what happened when the other one met with our vice president.
Yes.
This one's much
All right.
stronger. That's okay. That wasn't the level boss.
Okay.
That was the little mini
so-
boss.
All right, so hit the speed.
1.25?
Is it set to 1.25?
Okay. And that is the end of the Pope fan cam, but that's okay. So you kind of get the idea. You know, I don't know if I would describe Leo as the end boss because, you know, ultimately Jesus is the end boss. But I kind of feel like at the very least, like, you know, like, yeah, Francis was the level boss. And now we've got an even tougher level boss, or maybe not a tougher level boss, but a younger, stronger, healthier level boss who's going to be around for a good long time. Um, Now, since we are on the topic of anti-popes, I wanted to take a second and talk about what Leo is, um, what's going on as far as the schism watch goes. Again, on Tuesdays, I'm trying to keep it more of a like church history, just the facts, not a lot of opinions. Um, and so and again, I have no interest in trying to steel man tradcath opinions. So I just go directly to the source. Anthony Stein is the least objectionable tradcath YouTuber of whom I am aware. So we're just going to go and see what he has to say. I'm going to turn off the sound for a second. So we're going to find out what Anthony Stein has to say. And we are also going to spend a little bit, and because again, he's a good news aggregator and he kind of does a really good job of providing a decent surface level introduction into modern sedevacantism, which again is the belief that no pope since for sure 1958, when John the 23rd was elected, possibly before that, possibly a little bit after, depending on who you're talking to, was actually a legitimate pope. So we'll just spend the next, I don't know, like little while running through this, and then we will find some time to talk about the Council of Ephesus.
Reading materials for the weekends, and I got a couple of them for you today. One of them is about the Transalpine Redemptorists, as they're more commonly called. They have been in the news the last year or so, growing more and more separate from first Rome and then, well, the SSPX. And by separate, I don't mean in schism, but keeping their distance, really. They have come to the conclusion that the crisis in the church is much worse than most people are willing to admit. And well, I tend to share that much with them. They have taken this to one of the end results that we see all too common. I reported a week or two ago that they were participating in a group, in a imperfect council, or were in the process of planning it with a bishop, a sedevacantist bishop.
An imperfect council, just to review, is a irregular conclave. Normally, that would be something that would take place, like, for example, if like there were some horrible tragedy and like literally like a asteroid struck Rome during a general consistory, so the Pope and all of the cardinals were no longer with us. The world's surviving bishops, or at least as many of them could get together, would be able to select a pope. Or, for example, if like Mothra completely isolates the islands of Japan from the rest of the world, the Japanese bishops would be able to select their own interim leader. That kind of thing. It's not meant to be like, we just don't like the outcome of the conclave.
That implied that they had embraced the sedevacantist position, that they hadn't formally announced it as yet. Well, they have now. They have announced that they are sedevacantists. They don't believe there's been a valid pope since 1958, give or take. And they make the case for it here. You'll see how a lot of people come to this conclusion, the same conclusion they came to in this letter. I don't endorse sedevacantism. I also don't condemn those who embrace it, because we see the things that are going on in the church to the extreme level that they are, including a Roman pontiff playing super happy, fun time nice with the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Okay. Before we get him yelling about the fact that there is a woman archbishop, I just want to emphasize just real quickly here that this is an important moment, because Anthony Stein identifies as a traditional Catholic, but not a sedevacantist. And in like extreme far right traditional Catholicism, there is essentially a distinction that is drawn between people who maybe think that the Pope is a heretic, and you don't really have to listen to him. That's called recognize and resist, or sedi-probationism. Then you have full sedi-vacantism. The Pope is not the Pope, and we need to figure out a way to get a new Pope that's a valid Pope. And those are traditionally, those positions have been at odds with each other. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we get to that in the video essay. Anthony Stein is interesting because he is very sedevacantist friendly. And the thing that is going to become the issue that we will be keeping an eye on from now until July 1st is if the traditional Catholics and the sedevacantists start to make peace. Because if they start to make peace and start working together, then we could be looking at a situation where a schism will happen, and it will involve enough people that it could actually become a denomination that could make a go of it, at least for a little while.
Who is a woman, and treating her as if she was anything but a pretender to her presumed office, let alone the other heresies and problems that go along with being part of the Anglican Church, you start having serious doubts about the validity of things. We see it all the time. And this is just the most recent example. We're, leaving aside all the politics these people play and the fast and looseness they play.
Okay, so let's be very clear about what Anthony Stein is complaining about. Anthony Stein is complaining about the fact that when the head of the Anglican Communion, who is a woman, went to see the Pope, she went dressed up in her full archbishop suit and was treated with respect as an archbishop. He finds that intolerable. He finds that so intolerable that even though he believes that there is literally no salvation outside of the Catholic Church, he's willing to play logic games that will get him potentially excommunicated by the Pope. And he's saying that that won't count as an excommunication. Like, I really am trying to remain detached and academic, but from an objective point of view, I have trouble describing that as anything other than a schismatic position.
Play with Catholic teaching. The fact that you have someone like Cardinal Fernandez as the chief doctrine officer for the church raises some red flags. But there are people who came to this conclusion under John Paul II, especially after the Assisi conferences and the things that he participated in. This is not a new issue. And oftentimes it's hard to argue against what they do, not this conclusion they come to. So we're going to go here to LifeSite News for some context first for this organization, because they report on this, and then I have the actual letter from the Transalpine Redemptorists themselves. The LifeSite reported on this under the headline, "Breaking, He is no Pope at all. Traditional Redemptorists reject Leo XIV and his predecessors. The Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer have denounced the reforms of the Second Vatican Council and called for a solution. Their solution is the Imperfect Council, which this essentially sedevacantist bishop.
I'm just going to let it run for a second while he lays this out. Anyway, so the Sons of the Most Holy Redeemer, also known as the Transalpine Redemptorists, are going to have a conclave. I'm going to turn the sound back on.
Then under the auspices of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre and the Society of St. Pius X, at the encouragement of Cardinal Edouard Gagnon. It was reconciled with the Vatican in 2012 in his operations in the US and New Zealand. Now, Archbishop Lefebvre wrestled with the sedevacantism question himself and publicly rejected it numerous times, leading, of course, to the break from the SSPX of the founding stock of a certain wing of sedevacantist priests. There's the What Catholics Believe priest, Father William Jenkins. He was part of that group, as was Father Anthony Cicada, probably the most well-known sedevacantist priest. He was part of that, as I believe Bishop Sanborn, I think, was part of that. Although if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. It goes on to say, the letter attached to the declaration.
Pay attention to all of those names because it is very easy, especially when you're online, to run across various groups that will just present themselves as Catholic. And won't necessarily make it clear, at least up front, that they are advocating for a sedevacantist position. Of course, from an academic point of view, sedevacantists are still Catholics, but it's worth noting that Catholicism is, you have about 1 billion people who consider themselves in communion with Rome, and then you've got another, I don't know, you got another, decent sized denominations worth of people that are Catholic affiliated or Catholic adjacent.
Explains the community's position regarding the state of the church following Vatican II, detailing the prior teaching of the church and arguing that there has been a significant departure from it. I don't disagree that there's been a significant departure from it. We'll go here now to the letter. That article goes on to talk about how in 2024 they were ordered to leave their property in New Zealand and other places because they had at that point openly been in resistance to diocesan overreach and other things. Here's their letter.
Okay, so again, because I know that I talk about these people are marginal, and I want to emphasize that again. So when we're talking about the Transalpine Redemptorists, we're talking about a group that was in New Zealand, got kicked out of New Zealand, has attempted to form a new set of monasteries elsewhere, including in Scotland, and has now left the Catholic Church entirely. The person who is defending them, again, he's a layman with a YouTube channel living in Oklahoma. I'm a lay woman with a YouTube channel living in Arizona. In terms of the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, Anthony Stein and I are on roughly equal footing. Neither one of us, I'm speaking as someone who has some academic training in the study of religion. He's speaking as someone who has more academic training than I do in the field of political science. But from the point of view of the Catholic Church, it's like he's some guy, I'm some gal. And again, he's complaining about the guy who's the head of the DDF, not, anybody who is that important within the Catholic Church. But the fact that these people are marginal does not mean that they aren't real and that they aren't important and that they aren't doing things that are going to have a profound effect on the rest of the church, especially if they go into schism. because the second that the Transalpine Redemptorists go into schism, then people like Anthony Stein, like a lot of traditional Catholics, who are now basically crossing their fingers and praying for a nothing burger, are going to discover that they really have to either have an anti-pope or don't have an anti-pope. And it's like genuinely fascinating to watch this happening in real time.
Letter of declaration, the dogma to steer by. Dear faithful, many pastors have destroyed my vineyard. They have trodden my portion underfoot. They have changed my delightful portion into a desolate wilderness. They have laid it waste, and it hath mourned for me. With desolation is all the land made desolate, because there is none that considereth in the heart. See Jeremiah chapter 12, verses 10 to 11. We write to you with sorrow regarding a situation that has weighed upon some of us for many years. Years of watching, years of prayer, years of hoping against hope that what we were witnessing in the structures of the official church would somehow correct itself. This has not happened. The modernist presence within the structures and hierarchy of the official church has gone beyond critical mass to a near saturation point. The problem is now much deeper and more obvious to all. So what is the problem? The problem is, as St. Pius X warned, that the structures of the Catholic Church have been infiltrated by men of a different non-Catholic religion. They use the Catholic name. They occupy the Catholic buildings. They know the Catholic culture. From the outside, they look to be Catholics, but they do not profess the Catholic faith as taught through the centuries. In reality, they have been formed as revolutionaries committed to the condemned Freemasonic heresies of religious liberty, religious indifference, and false ecumenism. Their infiltration has struck a lethal wound to the Catholic religion. They have brought about a major schism from the mystical body. We must stand firmly within the Catholic Church and move well away from the camouflage of its counterfeit. We are witnessing today did not appear suddenly at Vatican II like a storm from a clear sky.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because at that point it's just a whole bunch of ranting, mostly ranting against the Freemasons. There is a reason why one of the very early videos on the channel was just me going, hey, Catholics, chill out about the Freemasons. Because, yes, I mean, there was a point in the 18th and 19th century, and even into the early 20th century, where particularly in France and Italy, the kind of people who honestly today would go and be like, Reddit debate bro atheists, by which I'm not talking about atheists in general, right? Most atheists of my acquaintance are perfectly lovely people who just happen not to believe in any kind of a God. However, then you have Reddit debate bro atheists who just want to, basically be trolls and troll religious people. And that is a lot of frankly, that's a lot of who ended up in the Freemasons. So they did a lot of really provocative, offensive, just annoying stuff just to get a reaction. And, they got the reaction. And unfortunately, a certain number of people in the Catholic Church decided that there was some kind of like weird Freemason conspiracy to conquer the world or something. And that part of that plan involved subverting the Catholic Church. So obviously, buying into sedevacantism, buying into the extreme forms of sedepravationism or recognize and resist that argue that the Pope is not a legitimate pontiff, is that, that's something that does require a certain amount of conspiratorial thinking. And unfortunately, conspiratorial thinking is something that there's not a shortage of right now. So, this is a developing situation. This is an ongoing situation. And this is also a situation that's kind of worth documenting. Um, and in as academic a way as I can, just because this is a moment in time that potentially could change things for a whole bunch of people. And we want to see kind of where that goes. Okay. But now we've talked about current events for a while. We've talked about church history. And now, since it's May, and May is, of course, the month of Mary. So therefore, I am going to talk about the four Marian dogmas, starting with the first one, which is Mary is the Theotokos, which means Mary is the female parent of God. She is generatrix. She is the person from whose body the physically human parts of God were made. And that makes her kind of a big deal. God's mom, kind of a big deal. And the interesting part, though, is that very often this is understood, particularly by Protestants, as being mostly about Mary, and mostly being a statement about Mary and Mary's nature and how things should involve her. And, part of that is that you have, things again. I'm going to whip out my prayer card prop. This is a picture of the Theotokos. It is also a picture of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It is also a picture that uses the iconography of the Immaculate Conception. So you have the woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet. It's also because, as you will notice, being a faithful Nerd Church viewer, she has this little belt around her waist, and the belt in Aztec iconography, that black belt, that dark colored belt tied high up on her waist, was a sign of pregnancy. So this is literally Mary bearing Christ inside of her, making Christ inside of her. But this was first pronounced as a dogma at the Council of Ephesus in the year 431. Why did it take until the first century? Well, part of that was because because the doctrine of the Trinity and just sort of what we call high Christology, right? So the idea that Jesus is God, Jesus always was God, Jesus will always be God, and Jesus is the second person of the Trinity. High Christology. That didn't get set in stone until like the late 3rd, early 4th century. And then it's a little while after that before people finally stop working out the initial theological implications for what that means in terms of Mary. So I should say not just the theological implications, but the Mariological implications. Because that's in a lot of ways what the study of Mary is. It's the study of what being in close proximity to God does to you, how it changes you, how someone would have to be in their own human existence in order to be God's mother. So, one of the results of that is Mary, for a lot of women, is held up as a less attainable model for womanhood. On the other hand, it also means that Mary is extraordinarily important in a way that a lot of women find empowering. So, let's just kind of talk about it. But I think that probably the easiest thing to do, now that we've established that Mary is kind of a big deal, is to actually go back to the original papal document and see what does it have to say about what does it have to say. what were the concerns about Ephesus that were going on in Ephesus, which is now in Turkey, in 431. Okay, so this is from the Papal Encyclicals online site. This one is not actually a official publication of the Catholic Church. It's more or less an amateur thing. However, it's done by people with proper qualifications, and it's done very well. So you can see it has a whole bunch of different councils. And we are going to start out with the Council of Ephesus from 431. Okay, so it has the introduction. And it starts out, oddly enough, not about the Theotokos. Nestorius, who had been condemned in a council in Rome on 11 August 430, asked for the council. And it was held in agreement with Pope Celestine I. And a whole bunch of people got together and decided what the canons, which is basically the proceedings, the findings of the council, are going to be. So this is the actual letter, which is the final document. Okay, so we have a whole bunch of basically yelling at Nestorius for quite a while. Essentially, what they're saying in this case is that, dude, did you even read the Nicene Creed? We figured this out like 100 years ago. Okay. So blah 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 blah. So now we get to the part where, and Nestorian Christianity, we can go into it earlier, it basically had an entirely different model of the nature of God than the one that ends up, becoming sort of the dominant Catholic and Orthodox and sort of liturgical creedal Christianity in general, whatever you want to call, like the Lutherans, Anglicans, Episcopalians, basically people who formally adhere to the Nicene Creed and have some form of communion that results in the real presence. So anyway, in the first paragraph, it says, so he who existed and was begotten of the Father before all ages is also said to have begotten according to the flesh of a woman, without the divine nature or beginning to exist of a holy virgin, or needing for itself a second begetting after her and the Father. So he is basically critiquing Nestorius's critique of the hypostatic union, which is the two different natures coming together to form a unity. So, but you notice that it's talking about this incarnation, right? The Word is said to have been begotten according to the flesh, both for us and our salvation. He united what was a human to himself hypostatically and came forth from a union. For he was not first begotten of the Holy Virgin, a man like us, and then the Word descended upon him. But from the very womb of his mother, he was so united and underwent begetting according to the flesh, making his own begetting the begetting of his own flesh. So as you can see, yes, it's making a point about Mary, but really this is talking about Jesus and Jesus's body and the nature of the incarnation. And then anything that it says about Mary is essentially a logical conclusion based on that. And then we've got a whole bunch about Jesus. Okay. The words becoming flesh meant nothing else than he partook. Yeah, this is Cyril writing to Nestorius. And I just wanted to double check and make sure that we were still on Cyril. And then the word becoming flesh means nothing else than he partook of flesh and blood like us. He made our body his own and came forth a man from a woman without casting aside his deity or his generation from God the Father, rather in his assumption of the flesh remaining who he was. This is the account of the truth faith everywhere professed. So we shall find the Holy Fathers believed. So they have dared to call the Holy Virgin Mother of God, not through the nature of the Word, nor his Godhead received from the origin of their being from the Holy Virgin, but because there was born from her his holy body rationally ensouled, which the Word was hypostatically united and is said to have been begotten in the flesh. So, and then we have, these letters back and forth between Cyril and Nestorius. And again, it's about the mother, but only to the extent that the mother is the one is but because the mother is believing these things about the mother is necessary because of what's already been established about God. So then this takes us back from the letters to the 12 anathemas, which are basically the definitive statements of belief that are coming out of the Council of Ephesus. And they are, if anyone does not confess that Emmanuel is God in truth, and therefore the Holy Virgin is the mother of God, for she bore in a fleshly way the word of God became flesh, let him be anathema. And generally, anathema is set by church councils unless they are explicitly abolished by further church councils, are generally considered to still be in effect. Now, obviously, there are some things that have just kind of fallen by the wayside, and sometimes that is for a reason, and sometimes it's something that they just haven't gotten around to fixing that little piece of paperwork. But in general, things that have been allowed to stand over the centuries are just there. So for a Catholic, when you go back to now, is there a lot of technical language in here? Yes, absolutely. Hypostatic union. I'll be talking about that later because I just want to get through the anathemas today. But basically, it's a whole big pile of Greek philosophy that you just have to get through, or at least memorize the technical definitions. But at the end of the day, we're left with Mary is the mother of God. Then we have number 2 is and then we have 2 and 3, and 4, are all relating to the hypostatic union. And then again, but see, all this 9 through 8, there's nothing about Mary. It's all Jesus. Um, and then there is the letter exposing the that was kicking out the Eastern bishops. Specifically the Nestorians and the Eastern Christians who did not accept the idea that Jesus and God were, well, sorry, not Jesus and God, that Jesus in his human and divine nature was united, one, not separable. That was what the fight was at Ephesus. The fight at Ephesus was not over, should we honor the Virgin Mary? Should we respect the Virgin Mary? Should the Virgin Mary be an object of devotion? That wasn't, yes, there was devotion to the Virgin Mary, but the logical and but the theological framework hadn't been declared dogma. It hadn't been declared something that you absolutely had to believe. And at Ephesus, really what changed was that you had a whole bunch of stuff about the nature of Christ was established for sure. And it was presented as a logical consequence of that, that we had to believe that Mary was the mother of God, the God bearer, the Theotokos, the Dei Genetrix, sorry. So that was kind of where we ended up. So you end up with in 431, the decision is made that, you know what? Jesus's mom is kind of a big deal. And then things just kind of snowball from there. Okay, that is all that I had to say today. Yep, there are no unanswered questions in the chat. So come back in a few days, come back on Thursday, and I will have another stream where I will be talking about some of the, less fun things in the Catholic Church that are going on. And of course, on Sunday, we will be talking about the lectionary. And just real quick, a couple people have asked, why, if you're talking about the modern church, if you're talking about church history, why are you spending so much time on the lectionary? And I just wanted to quickly go into that a little bit. Basically, it's because the lectionary is how Catholics encounter the Bible. The lectionary is how Catholics are exposed to the texts of Christianity and interact with those texts. So it's super important if we're going to try to understand what Catholicism looks like as a modern religion, that we need to talk about how how identity is shaped and how knowledge is formed. And one of the ways that it's formed in the Catholic Church is by reading through hearing sections of the Bible read out to you every single week. So I hope that that's helpful and interesting. On Thursday, we're going to talk about some of the new Episcopal appointments, as well as some of the controversies surrounding blessings for couples in, as the term of art is, irregular relationships. So I hope you'll come back Thursday. I hope that some of you had a good time today, and I will see you tomorrow.